He paid her to pretend to love him, but she was the one who taught him how to live again. Millionaire hired a nurse to pretend to love him, but she taught him how to live again. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. If you enjoy cinematic love stories with justice and second chances, please subscribe and tap the notification bell so you never miss a new episode. And tell me, where are you watching from today? Now, let us return to our main character. The storm outside his Manhattan penthouse rolled in slow and heavy, thunder rumbling like a tired heart. Grant Carter stood by the window, his reflection framed against the skyline, tall, cold, immaculate, but hollow. Once the youngest medical tech millionaire in New York, now he was the man who survived a car crash that killed his fiancée and any reason to live. Across from him, sitting on the edge of a leather chair, was Anna Monroe, 28, a registered nurse whose gentle hands had stitched together hundreds of lives, except her own. Her mother's hospital bills were piling up, her career was hanging by a thread, and now this insane offer. Grant slid a document across the table, his tone calm, precise. "Companion nurse," he said. "Non-medical, public appearances only. Duration, 30 days. Anna scanned the contract, confusion flickering across her face. "So, you want me to pretend to be your girlfriend?" Grant's jaw tightened. "To be exact, I need someone convincing enough to make the board believe I am recovering. They will not trust a man who still looks broken. And you think hiring a stranger to fake affection will fix that?" She shot back, eyes sharp. He met her gaze, unflinching. "I do not need affection, Miss Monroe. I need credibility." The silence stretched between them, filled only by the rain against the glass. Anna folded the contract and exhaled, her voice low. "I am a nurse, not an actress." "Then you will be perfect," Grant said, standing. "Actors lie, nurses heal." That line hit something she had been trying to bury, the memory of the patient who died under her watch, the one mistake that ruined her name. Maybe this was not just a job. Maybe it was her last chance to prove she could still care for someone without losing herself. She looked at him again. The man was a fortress of discipline and wealth, but behind his eyes there was exhaustion, the kind that no medicine could cure. "What happens when 30 days are over?" she asked. "Then we end the act," he replied, voice soft but distant. "You will get your payment, and I will get my life back." Anna hesitated, fingers brushing the edge of the paper. "You really believe life can be bought?" Grant glanced at the bracelet on his wrist, silver, engraved with 2 small words. "Live again." "I am trying to," he said quietly. "That is why I need you." For a long moment, she said nothing. The rain eased outside, the city lights shimmered through the glass, and the contract waited between them like a dare. Finally, she reached for the pen. "I will do it," she said. "But if you want me to fake love, you should know I am not good at pretending." Grant's lips curved in the faintest hint of a smile. "Neither am I." And as the ink touched paper, the deal was sealed, 2 broken souls signing what they thought was a performance, never knowing it would become the story that saved them both. Morning came gray and cold over the city. The skyline glowed faintly beyond the rain-washed windows of Grant Carter's penthouse. On the marble counter, the signed contract lay where they had left it. Anna Monroe arrived promptly at 7, her nurse's badge tucked neatly on her uniform, though the job now had nothing to do with medicine. Grant greeted her with the same composure that he used in board meetings. "You will start by accompanying me to therapy sessions and public appointments," he said. "Appear relaxed. Act natural." She gave a quiet laugh. "You say that like I have ever been inside a billionaire's life before." Grant's mouth curved slightly. "You will learn fast." The first week unfolded like a strange play. Every morning she followed him through corridors of glass and steel. His driver opened doors, assistants whispered schedules, and Anna smiled through flashes of camera lights as if this was normal. She was there when Grant's board members dropped by, when the media snapped photos, when he shook hands that felt colder than marble. But behind closed doors, the mask fell. He limped slightly from the old injury, his movements careful, as if every step reminded him of the crash that stole more than mobility. He spoke little, kept his distance, and avoided mirrors. Anna noticed everything: the untouched meals, the way he turned the music off mid-song, the empty chair at the piano. On the third night, she set a single white lily in a glass of water on the piano. He saw it but said nothing. Their conversations began small. "How is your leg today?" she asked once, gently. "Functional," he replied. "That is not the same as fine." "I do not need fine," he said, and went back to his emails. By the end of the second week, the press believed the act. Tabloids printed headlines: "Billionaire Grant Carter seen smiling again." But Anna knew the truth: he was not smiling, just surviving. One evening after a public charity dinner, they returned to the penthouse. She removed her heels and exhaled, laughing softly. Pretending to be in love is exhausting. Grant looked up from the decanter of scotch. Pretending to live is worse. The line hit her harder than he expected. She walked to the window where the city glittered below. "You talk like a man who stopped believing in anything." "I stopped believing the day I buried her," he said quietly. Anna turned. His face was unreadable, but his hands trembled slightly as he set the glass down. She understood then this was not about the board or the company's image. This was about a man who could build an empire yet could not rebuild himself. Without asking, she picked up the neglected piano cover and brushed the dust away. "Play something," she said. He almost laughed. "I cannot." "My hand." "Try," she insisted. For the first time in months, Grant sat at the piano. His fingers hesitated, then pressed a note, soft, uneven, but alive. The melody wavered, fragile as breath, until it filled the quiet room. Anna watched in silence. The music was not perfect, but it was real. When he finished, she smiled faintly. "See? That is not pretending." Something inside him shifted. He looked at her not as a hired companion, not as a stranger, but as someone who saw him without judgment. Later that night, she left her small leather notebook on the table. Inside, on the first page, were 3 words written in neat cursive: "Gratitude starts small." Grant found it the next morning. He read it twice before closing the cover and placing it beside the white lily, now beginning to bloom. Outside, the city stirred awake, but for the first time in a long while, he felt something inside him move too quiet, uncertain, but undeniably alive. The following week blurred into a rhythm neither of them had expected. Every morning, Anna arrived before sunrise, bringing warmth into the sterile luxury of Grant's penthouse. She had replaced the assistant's clipped tone with quiet encouragement, the cold routine with something human. The air no longer smelled of disinfectant and silence, it smelled of brewed coffee and the faint perfume of lilies. Grant began to change in ways too subtle for headlines. He walked longer distances without his cane. He started eating breakfast instead of staring at it. Sometimes, when Anna thought he was not looking, he would glance at the notebook she had left, the one that said, "Gratitude starts small." Their roles blurred. What began as a contract became companionship. She was not performing anymore, and he was no longer pretending that he did not need her. One morning, while adjusting his physical therapy strap, Anna caught him studying her reflection in the mirror. "What?" she asked. "You make this place look alive again," he said. She smiled faintly. "That is my job." "No," he replied, voice low. "Your job was to pretend. You stopped pretending a while ago." He turned away before she could answer. That night, she found another note inside her notebook, written in his hand. Day 14. Thankful for someone who sees beyond the damage. The gala came near the end of their third week. It was the first public test of their act, and the first time Grant appeared without his cane. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers, champagne, and people who spoke in measured compliments. Anna wore a dark navy dress, chosen by his stylist. Grant, in a tailored suit, looked like the man he used to be. Cameras flashed as they entered. She kept her arm linked with his, the practiced smile steady, until one of the board members, a silver-haired man with too much pride, leaned in. "So this is the miracle nurse," he said with a smirk. "Tell me, Miss Monroe, how much do you charge for curing grief?" The insult cut through the noise. Grant froze, jaw tight, but before he could speak, Anna did. "Grief does not need a cure," she said evenly. "It needs patience. Some of us choose to stay beside people until they can breathe again." The man looked embarrassed. Others turned to listen, and for a moment the whole room fell silent. Grant's eyes softened. For the first time, he did not feel like a man pitied, he felt seen. Later, as they drove back through the quiet city, he spoke without looking at her. "You did not have to defend me. I was not defending you," she said. "I was defending what is real." He nodded slowly. "What is real?" he repeated, as if testing the sound of it. Back at the penthouse, Anna slipped off her heels and leaned against the counter, exhaustion catching up to her. Grant poured 2 glasses of water and handed one to her. "You were perfect tonight," he said. She shook her head. "Perfect is fake. I just told the truth." He smiled for the first time. A real, quiet smile. "That is what makes it perfect." As she left, he caught sight of her reflection in the elevator mirror, the same mirror where he once only saw emptiness. Now, he saw color, movement, life. When the doors closed, he looked at the bracelet on his wrist. The words, "Live Again," gleamed under the soft light. He ran his thumb across the letters, thinking of her laughter, her honesty, and the way she had turned his cold existence into something that almost felt human. Upstairs, in the silence of the penthouse, Grant sat at the piano once more. His fingers found the melody she had made him play before. The music flowed smoother this time, still imperfect, but stronger. Each note carried a quiet truth. He did not realize it yet, but the act was over. The line between contract and connection had already vanished. The night after the gala, the city hummed quietly beneath a silver sky. Grant could not sleep. The echo of her voice still lingered, steady, kind, unafraid. He replayed it over and over until the memory of the ballroom blurred into something deeper. It had been a long time since anyone had spoken for him, not to his wealth or title, but to his pain. When morning came, Anna found him already dressed, leaning on the balcony rail with the sunrise spilling over the skyline. "You did not rest?" she asked softly. "I played instead," he said. "I remembered what you said about patience." For a moment they stood in silence, the wind carrying the smell of coffee and rain. Then Grant turned to her. "There is a charity event next week. Children's Hospital. I want you there with me." She hesitated. "You sure it is not too soon?" "I am sure," he said simply. "I want them to see that I am alive again." Over the next few days, they practiced for interviews and appearances. But something had changed. It was no longer a performance. When she adjusted his tie, her fingers brushed his collarbone, and neither of them moved away. Their conversations stretched past work and therapy, childhood, fear, faith, loneliness. He told her about the night of the crash, how he had survived while the woman he loved had not. She told him about losing her father to illness, how she had learned to smile for her mother's sake. One evening, while preparing dinner together, Grant burned his hand on a pan. "I am fine," he said, waving her off, but she caught his wrist, running cold water over it. "You always say that," she murmured. "Because it is easier than admitting I am not," he replied. Their eyes met, the air between them suddenly still. For the first time, there was no mask, no contract, just 2 people standing in the same silence, each seeing the other clearly. At the charity event, Grant spoke to the crowd without reading the script. Cameras flashed, the audience applauded, and Anna watched him from the side of the stage, pride softening her features. He looked lighter, as if every word helped him breathe again. But not everyone celebrated. Among the guests was Marcus Hale, a rival board member who had always resented Grant's position. After the speech, Marcus approached with a thin smile. "Touching story," he said. "Though it will be more touching when the press finds out your perfect nurse is on your payroll." Grant's expression hardened. "Watch your words," Marcus shrugged. "It is public record, my friend. Contracts leave paper trails." Anna overheard enough to understand the threat. That night, while Grant thanked donors, Marcus quietly slipped away and she felt a knot of fear settle in her stomach. Back at the penthouse, Grant found her staring out the window. Something wrong? She hesitated. Someone might try to use this against you, against us. He smiled faintly. Then let them. I have nothing left to hide. But his calm did not ease her worry. She turned to him, voice trembling slightly. You think this will just fade when the contract ends? That we can go back to pretending none of this mattered? Grant's eyes met hers. I do not want to go back. For a heartbeat, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the soft hum of the city below. Then, almost without thinking, he reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Anna froze. Grant! He stepped closer. Tell me to stop, and I will. But she did not. He kissed her gently, like a man relearning how to feel. When they finally pulled apart, she whispered, This was not in the contract. He smiled, voice low. Good. It means we are finally living outside of it. Outside. Lightning flashed across the skyline, brief and bright. Neither of them noticed. Inside the penthouse, two people who had built walls around their hearts realized those walls had already started to fall. The next morning arrived with sunlight spilling through the tall glass windows, soft and golden. For the first time in years, Grant Carter woke before the alarm. The air felt lighter, and for a brief moment, he almost forgot what loneliness had been. He made coffee, 2 cups this time, before realizing Anna was still asleep in the guest room down the hall. He smiled quietly to himself. When she finally appeared, her hair tied loosely, and eyes still heavy with sleep, the sight caught him off guard. You made coffee? She asked, surprised. I am capable of basic survival, he said, handing her a cup. She laughed, taking it from him. It smells better than survival. The easy rhythm between them felt almost dangerous, too real, too natural for something built on a contract. Over breakfast, she asked, When was the last time you cooked for someone? He thought for a moment. Before the accident. Then today counts as progress, she said gently. They spent the rest of the day preparing for the upcoming board meeting, the one that would determine whether Grant could reclaim his position as CEO. The company had suffered during his absence, and investors were skeptical. Anna's presence had restored his image in the media, but now everything rested on proving that he was not just healed in body, but in spirit. That evening, while Anna reviewed his talking points, she noticed his hands shaking slightly. You are nervous, she said. Terrified, he admitted. I have not spoken to them since I stopped being myself. Then speak as the man you have become, she said softly. Not the one they used to know. The next day, the boardroom was a battlefield dressed in marble and glass. Cameras flashed as Grant entered, with Anna walking beside him. The whispers around the table faded when he took his seat at the head. He spoke clearly, his voice steady, his gaze direct. For months, I lived believing that survival was enough, he began. But surviving is not the same as living. Leadership is not about perfection, it is about resilience. And I learned that from someone who refused to let me hide behind my pain. The room was silent. Even Marcus Hale, the rival who had threatened to expose him, seemed unsettled. Grant continued, addressing questions with calm authority, his confidence reborn. By the time the vote concluded, the decision was unanimous. He was reinstated as CEO. After the meeting, Anna waited by the elevator. He approached her, his smile small but genuine. It is done, he said. She grinned. I never doubted you. Maybe you should have, he teased. I doubted myself enough for both of us. They left the building to find reporters waiting outside. Questions fired from every direction. Is it true you hired her? One shouted. Was it all staged? Grant stopped and looked at Anna, then turned to the cameras. Yes, he said calmly. I hired her. But the truth is, she did not pretend for me. I pretended for the world. She is the reason I found the courage to stop. The reporters went silent, microphones lowering as if the weight of honesty itself had stunned them. Grant took Anna's hand, guiding her through the flashing lights without letting go. That night, back at the penthouse, Anna stood by the window, watching the city pulse with life below. You should be proud, she said. I am, he replied quietly. But pride fades. Gratitude lasts. She turned, meeting his eyes. There was no pretense left between them, no contract, no script, just two people who had taught each other how to begin again. He stepped closer, his voice soft. "Thank you for teaching me to live." Her reply came in a whisper. "Thank you for letting me try." Outside, the city lights blurred into gold, and for the first time, their story felt real. If this fake marriage universe pulls you in, subscribe now so you never miss the next chapter. Days passed after the board meeting, and for a while, everything felt still almost peaceful. Grant Carter threw himself back into work, meetings, and rebuilding the company that nearly slipped through his hands. Yet, beneath the polished confidence, there was something new, something fragile that he could not quite name. Every time Anna Monroe entered the room, the steady rhythm of his world shifted. She remained at his side, helping with his rehabilitation schedule, his medications, and the growing number of charity projects he had started. Their laughter began to replace the quiet spaces that once filled his penthouse. The place no longer felt like a museum of grief. It felt lived in, real, warm. One late afternoon, while Grant reviewed reports in his office, Anna walked in carrying 2 cups of tea. "You skipped lunch again," she said. "I was focused," he replied without looking up. She set the tea beside his laptop. "Focused is fine. Starving is not." He looked up then, smiling faintly. "You are starting to sound like my conscience. I will take that as a compliment," she said, sitting across from him. They talked about the upcoming charity program for veterans, about expanding the medical grant his company had funded. Then, without meaning to, Grant said quietly, "When this started, I thought hiring you would make me look alive. Now, I actually feel it." Anna looked at him, unsure whether to smile or cry. "Maybe that is the real treatment you needed," she said softly, "but peace rarely lasts." The next morning, chaos erupted. A headline blazed across every screen. "Grant Carter's girlfriend was hired nurse. Contract leaked." The article showed scanned copies of the very contract Anna had signed, complete with her signature and salary details. The photos from the gala, their closeness, every gesture they were now twisted into proof of deception. Anna's phone buzzed nonstop. The hospital administration suspended her pending investigation. Reporters camped outside her building. Her name was suddenly everywhere, attached to words like fake, liar, gold digger. When Grant arrived home that night, she was already packing her things. "I should have known this would happen," she said, her voice shaking. "You are not leaving," he said firmly. "We will fix this." "Grant, you cannot fix what the world wants to believe. You told them the truth, and they turned it into a scandal." "Then I will tell them again," he said, stepping closer. But she shook her head. "If you stand up for me, they will call it damage control. If you stay silent, they will say I used you. Either way, you lose." His jaw tightened, his eyes heavy with helplessness. "You think I care what they say? I think you care about your company," she said quietly. "And you should. You fought too hard to rebuild it." Silence filled the space between them. Finally, she took off the silver bracelet he had given her, placing it on the table beside his laptop. "You once told me this was about learning to live again. You have done that. Now let me do the same." "Anna, please," she interrupted, her voice trembling but resolute. "Do not make this harder." She picked up her bag and walked toward the door. Grant stood frozen, unable to move, unable to breathe. The door closed softly, and the sound echoed like a final heartbeat. Later that night, the city lights stretched endlessly below him, but the penthouse felt empty again. The white lilies had wilted on the piano. The notebook she had left behind sat open to the last page. In her handwriting were the words, "Today, I finally taught someone how to live again. Maybe that is enough." Grant closed the notebook slowly. The silence pressed around him, heavier than before. For the first time since the crash, he cried not for the woman he lost years ago, but for the one who had just walked away. 2 new Millionaire stories every day. Subscribe now to stay with this universe. The week after Anna left, Grant Carter's world became a blur of noise and headlines. News channels replayed his silence at the board meeting, twisting it into guilt. Investors demanded explanations. Every reporter wanted a confession. His assistant urged him to issue a statement, but Grant refused. He knew words would not save her, and denial would not erase the truth. He stayed in the penthouse most nights, alone, staring at the empty piano. Her bracelet still lay where she had left it. The city outside moved on without him, bright and indifferent. Inside, he replayed every moment her laughter, her honesty, the warmth she carried into every cold room. It was unbearable, how quickly light could leave. Then one morning, his phone rang. It was his lawyer. "You should see this," the man said. "Marcus Hale just filed an ethics complaint. He claims you falsified public image to manipulate investor confidence. It is going to court." Grant's heart sank. Marcus had finally used the scandal as a weapon. And now, if the board believed the accusations, everything he rebuilt could collapse again. But something in him shifted, an old fear replaced by quiet resolve. He was done hiding. If the truth was all he had left, he would stand on it. 2 days later, the courtroom filled with reporters and murmurs. Marcus sat smugly at the prosecution table, waving printed copies of the leaked contract. "He hired her to deceive this company," Marcus declared. "He lied to every shareholder, every client, every employee." Grant stood when called to speak. The cameras clicked, but his voice was steady. "Yes, I hired her. The contract was real. But the love that came after was not part of it. She gave me back what no board meeting ever could, my humanity. I owe her my recovery, not my reputation." The room went silent. The judge, unmoved by spectacle, asked for evidence of fraud. Marcus had none. The case fell apart within an hour. The court dismissed the complaint, and Grant walked out into the afternoon light, free but not whole. Outside the courthouse, microphones surrounded him. Someone shouted, "Where is she now?" He looked straight into the lens. "She is where she has always been," he said, "saving lives. Mine was just one of them." He turned away before the next question came. For the first time, he did not feel the need to explain himself. The world could believe whatever it wanted. The truth was simple. He had lost her because he had stayed silent when she needed him to speak. Now, he intended to make that right. A month passed after the trial, and Grant Carter had rebuilt everything, his company, his public image, even his calm. But none of it mattered. Every success felt hollow without Anna Monroe beside him. He kept working late, pretending the ache was exhaustion, but the truth was simpler. He missed her. One morning, while reviewing a charity proposal, he noticed something familiar on the desk of his foundation's new coordinator, a notebook, the same brown leather cover Anna used to carry. He froze, flipping it open. Inside was her handwriting, notes about patient care programs and a new project titled the Live Again Foundation. His chest tightened. She had named it after his bracelet. He called his assistant immediately. "Who is running this project?" "Anna Monroe," came the answer. "She started last week. The board approved her grant under the foundation's medical outreach division." Grant was already on his feet before the call ended. By afternoon, he arrived at the small community clinic where the project had begun. The space was modest white walls, shelves stacked with supplies, sunlight streaming through open windows. In the center of it all, Anna stood, guiding a volunteer nurse through patient forms. She looked different, tired, but grounded, more at peace than he had ever seen her. When she noticed him, her breath caught. "Grant," she said quietly. He smiled faintly. "So this is where you disappeared to." She tried to keep her tone steady. "I did not disappear. I just needed to start over." He nodded, glancing around the clinic. "You named it after my bracelet." "No," she said gently. "I named it after what it meant. You taught me that living again is a choice." He stepped closer, his voice low. "You taught me the same thing, and I made the wrong choice when I let you walk away." For a long moment, neither spoke. The noise of the clinic faded into the distance. Grant reached into his pocket and pulled out the bracelet she had left behind. "I kept it," he said, "because it never stopped meaning something." Anna hesitated, eyes glistening. "Grant, the world already wrote its story about us." "Then let us write the ending ourselves," he said softly. He placed the bracelet on her wrist once more. the silver catching the afternoon light. Around them, the clinic buzzed with life patients, volunteers, laughter. It was not the grand world of penthouses and boardrooms, but it was real, alive, human. "Come back with me," he said. "Not for appearances, not for contracts, just for us." Anna took a slow breath, then nodded. "Only if we build something worth staying for." Grant smiled, a quiet promise in his eyes. "Then we start here." Together, they turned toward the busy ward, side by side again, no longer pretending, no longer running. For the first time, both of them were exactly where they were meant to be. The months that followed turned into the quietest, happiest time of Grant Carter's life. The Live Again Foundation grew faster than anyone expected, reaching hospitals across the country. Grant divided his time between the boardroom and the clinic, but it was the clinic that changed him the most. He no longer led from behind polished glass. He listened, helped, and stayed late to talk with patients who reminded him what survival really meant. Anna Monroe worked beside him every day. Their rhythm returned, but this time it was not an act. They shared morning coffee in paper cups instead of porcelain, laughter instead of silence. He still limped slightly, and she still wore her hair tied back in the same simple knot. Everything about them was ordinary, and that was exactly what made it beautiful. One Friday evening, the foundation hosted its first anniversary gala. Reporters filled the hall, cameras flashing as Grant took the stage. He spoke not as a millionaire reclaiming his image, but as a man who had finally learned the difference between wealth and worth. "I once believed success meant control," he said, his voice steady. "Then I met someone who showed me that true strength is learning to be vulnerable, and real healing begins when you stop pretending to be whole." The audience rose in applause. When the lights dimmed, Grant walked off stage toward Anna, who waited near the piano. She looked radiant in a simple white dress, her eyes soft under the warm lights. "You did well," she said, smiling. He shook his head slightly. "We did well." Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. For a moment, the world seemed to fall silent. He opened it to reveal a silver ring engraved with the same words as his old bracelet, "Live Again." "Anna Monroe," he said quietly, his voice breaking just enough to sound real. "We started as a contract, but you became my choice. Will you marry me not for the world to see, but for us to live?" Tears welled in her eyes as she nodded. Yes, this time, for real. The crowd around them erupted into applause as the music swelled. But for Grant, the only sound that mattered was her laughter, light and alive, echoing through the hall. Later, they stepped outside into the cool night air. The city lights shimmered around them, and he wrapped his coat around her shoulders. "We made it," she whispered. He smiled. "No," he said. We began again. Above them, the skyline glowed bright, endless, and alive just like their story. If you want more untold billionaire love, subscribe and choose your next chapter on screen.